Someone looked at a luxury penthouse, looked at a coach, and decided to stack them on top of each other. And the result is genuinely one of the most audacious motorhome concepts I have ever put in front of a camera. Full transparency up front. What you are looking at is a fictional concept generated by AI. No manufacturer, no price tag, no delivery date. Just a vision. But the ideas embedded in this design, those are very real and very worth unpacking. Here is what we are doing today. We are going to walk the exterior of this thing because the front face alone deserves 5 minutes of conversation. Then we are going inside, and I'm going to break down how a double-decker layout actually changes the way you live in a vehicle, not just how it looks. Then powertrain, then verdict. And I have one honest critique of this concept that I think might surprise you. One more thing before we start. There is something happening at the roofline transition between the lower and upper deck that I have genuinely not seen executed this way before. I'm saving it. We will get there. Let's go. Let's start where every conversation about a vehicle should start, the front face. Because a front face is a statement before the engine ever turns over. This concept opens with a triple-stack horizontal DRL signature, 3 distinct bands of ice blue LED light sitting across the upper face, and below that, a secondary lighting cluster in the lower bumper that mirrors the same language. You get this sense of layered aggression. It's not trying to be friendly. It's not trying to welcome you. It's telling you to get out of the way, and it does that with a kind of cold architectural confidence that I find genuinely compelling. The grille, and I use that word loosely because this is almost certainly a fully electric concept, is a series of horizontal chrome blades stacked tightly across the lower front fascia. In a real engineering scenario, those blades would serve as active aero shutters, opening at low speeds for thermal management, closing at highway speed to cut drag. Here, they're doing something more important. They're communicating performance without screaming it. That's a hard thing to do in vehicle design. Most concepts either whisper too quietly or shout too loudly. This one finds a register that feels controlled. Now step back. Look at the side profile, and I want you to notice something specific. The proportion decision the designer made between the lower deck and the upper deck. The lower body is darker, more planted, more aggressive. The upper deck is glassier, lighter, more transparent. That is not an accident. That is a deliberate visual weight distribution. Heavy at the bottom, airy at the top. And it's the reason this concept doesn't look like a double-decker bus that someone fitted with LED lights. It looks like something designed as a single, unified object. The side glass on the upper deck runs almost the full length of the vehicle. We're talking a panoramic strip that, if I'm reading the proportions correctly, spans somewhere between 8 and 10 meters of continuous glazing. For context, that's more glass than most luxury apartments put in an entire wall. What that means for the person living on the upper deck is a 270-degree view at motorway height. You are not looking out of a window, you're inside a moving observation platform. The lower deck glass is different, tinted darker, more private, more intentional. This is your sleeping and utility zone. The designer understood something here that most motorhome designers get wrong. Not every space needs the same relationship with the outside world. Some spaces are for looking out, some spaces are for shutting the world out. This concept separates those functions across 2 floors and uses glass specification to do it. That's sophisticated thinking. The wheels. 6 of them in a triple axle configuration, and they are large. I would estimate 22 to 24 inches based on the body proportion, with a multi-spoke turbine design finished in dark gunmetal. The tire profile is surprisingly low for a vehicle of this mass, which tells you the designer was thinking about stance and road presence rather than off-road capability. This concept is not going to a campsite. This concept is arriving at a private estate or pulling up alongside a superyacht. The wheel choice confirms the positioning. Ground lighting. Blue ambient strips running the full underside perimeter. On a production vehicle, this would be the kind of detail that costs almost nothing to engineer and communicates everything about intent. It says this vehicle knows it's being watched, and it's comfortable with that. The paint, a deep, matte charcoal, almost gunmetal in certain light angles, shifting slightly as the studio lighting rakes across the panels. Matte finishes on vehicles of this scale are an interesting choice because they demand perfection in panel quality. Any surface imperfection gets amplified, not hidden, by a matte finish. The fact that this concept renders cleanly in matte tells you the underlying surface geometry is resolved. I want to close the exterior section with this thought: the roofline. The transition from the lower deck to the upper deck, that shoulder line where the 2 volumes meet, is handled with a curved, almost nautical radius rather than a hard architectural edge. That's the detail I mentioned in the hook. We will talk about why that matters when we get to the interior, because it has direct consequences for what that upper deck feels like from the inside. Here is the honest position. We do not have interior renders. What we do have is an exterior that is extraordinarily well resolved, and that exterior tells us a significant amount about what is almost certainly happening inside. Think of this as detective work. I will show you my reasoning, and you can tell me in the comments where you think I am wrong. Let's start with scale. Based on those 22-inch wheels as a reference point, I am estimating this vehicle at approximately 14 to 15 meters in length and just under 4 meters in overall height. The lower deck ceiling, accounting for floor structure and mechanical space, is probably sitting at around 2 meters. Tight, but livable. The upper deck is where it gets interesting. Because of that curved roofline transition I mentioned, that nautical shoulder radius, the upper deck doesn't have a flat ceiling box pushed against the glass. It has a gently curved overhead that follows the arc of the roofline, and what that does experientially is make the space feel larger than it measures. You know the feeling of being inside a vaulted ceiling room versus a flat ceiling room of identical square footage? Same principle. The upper deck of this concept, I believe, is designed to feel like a loft, not a coach. Let me walk you through the zone layout I think this concept is running. Lower deck first. The lower deck, given the darker blasts and the more private visual language, is almost certainly your functional core. Cockpit at the very front, behind the cockpit, a galley kitchen and utility zone, midsection, a bathroom, rear section, the primary sleeping quarters. This is the layout logic that makes engineering sense because you want your water systems, kitchen, bathroom, centralized over the axle group for weight distribution, and you want the sleeping zone at the rear where road noise from the front wheels has dissipated. The kitchen in a concept at this level, if it were ever built, would be running induction rather than gas. At the size this vehicle implies, you have enough battery capacity that induction makes both practical and safety sense. I would expect integrated appliance panels, concealed storage, and a work surface that extends via a slide mechanism when parked. The lower deck kitchen is probably compact by design. This is not where you host a dinner party. That is what the upper deck is for. Speaking of which, the upper deck, that panoramic glass strip. Based on the exterior proportions, the upper deck habitable zone probably runs 6 to 7 meters, enough for a proper living and dining configuration. I think you are looking at a lounge forward, a dining zone mid-deck, and possibly a secondary sleeping or relaxation area toward the rear. The whole thing bathed in natural light from that continuous glass band. Imagine waking up on the upper deck of this concept at dawn, parked somewhere elevated. You are 4 meters off the ground. The glass wraps your peripheral vision. The view is uninterrupted. You are not camping. You are not in a hotel room. You are in something that has no direct comparison in the current market, and that is precisely the point of a concept like this. The cockpit. That forward windscreen is enormous, a near vertical face of glass that gives the driver a visibility envelope more like a commercial aircraft than a traditional motorhome. In a near-future scenario, you would almost certainly be looking at a fully digital instrument cluster, heads-up display projection, and Level 3 highway autonomy capability, which means that cockpit on a long motorway run becomes a forward observation lounge as much as a driving position. The driver becomes a passenger who happens to be seated at the front. Smart systems. Climate management at this scale, 2 decks, substantial glass area, requires serious engineering. You are almost certainly looking at a zone-by-zone climate system, with upper deck solar heat management via electrochromic glass that can tint automatically based on sun angle and interior temperature. Connectivity-wise, if this were engineered for reality, you would expect satellite internet, integrated AV systems, and a central control interface that manages everything from a single panel or a smartphone. The one interior detail I keep coming back to is the staircase connection between the 2 decks. In a 140-meter vehicle with this profile, you probably have roughly 1 meter of floor space to dedicate to a staircase. That is tight. The design solution almost certainly involves a curved or spiral stair located just behind the cockpit, which also doubles as a visual centerpiece when you board the vehicle. In the best motorhome interiors, the staircase is not just a staircase. It is a moment. It tells you immediately that what you are in is different. If this were ever engineered for reality, the powertrain conversation starts with one number: mass. A double-decker vehicle at this scale, 14 to 15 meters, full luxury fit-out across 2 decks, is going to come in somewhere between 20,000 and 26,000 kilograms fully loaded. That is heavy coach territory. And at that mass, full electric is not just a statement about sustainability, it is actually the engineering logic that makes the most sense, because electric motors deliver maximum torque from 0 RPM.
You do not need a gearbox managing a diesel power band to get 25 tons moving smoothly. Electric torque does that better, more quietly, and with far less mechanical complexity. The triple axle configuration you can see in the exterior is interesting from a powertrain perspective. In a real-world build scenario, you are likely looking at dual rear axle drive, one electric motor per rear axle, giving you all-wheel torque vectoring capability on the driven wheels. That means this vehicle, despite its mass, would handle gradient changes and surface transitions with a stability that no diesel coach can replicate. Battery capacity. Based on comparable heavy electric coaches, think BYD K12A or the Volvo 7900 electric, a vehicle at this scale would realistically need somewhere between 400 and 600 kilowatt hours of usable battery capacity for meaningful range. That is roughly 4 to 6 times the battery in a Tesla Model S. For reference, a 500 kilowatt-hour pack at highway speeds and full climate load would deliver somewhere between 300 and 400 kilometers of range. Not unlimited, but enough for a full day of travel between charges. The roof solar, visible as a flush integrated panel across the upper deck, would not meaningfully extend drive range at this vehicle's power consumption level. What solar makes sense for is off-grid interior systems, climate, lighting, water heating, entertainment. The solar roof is your independent system, not your propulsion system, and that is the right way to think about it. Here's my honest take on this concept. What it does genuinely well? The visual hierarchy. The decision to treat the lower and upper decks as two distinct design languages, aggressive and planted below, transparent and airy above, gives this concept a coherence that most double-decker concepts completely fail to achieve. Most of them look like someone bolted a second floor onto a bus. This one looks like it was designed as a single idea. What seems impractical? The wheelbase. Triple axle configurations at this length create a turning radius problem that is genuinely significant in real-world use. You are not threading this through a mountain village or pulling into a standard motorhome park. The concept works visually because it doesn't have to exist in a world with turning circles and overhead clearances. In reality, the operating environment for this vehicle would be severely limited. Private roads, dedicated routes, purpose-built destinations. That's a small market even for a concept this ambitious. The most impressive detail? That roofline transition, the curved shoulder radius where the two deck volumes meet. It's the single detail that separates this from being a rendered bus and makes it feel like considered industrial design. Whoever made that call understood that the meeting point of two large volumes is where design either succeeds or fails. One thing I would change, the front-face DRL signature. 3 bands works, but the spacing between the bands is slightly uneven, and on a concept this resolved everywhere else, that inconsistency reads as a mistake rather than a choice. 2 bands, perfectly spaced, with more intentional negative space between them would be stronger. Sometimes restraint is the bolder decision. What this signals about luxury mobility? We are entering a period where the question is no longer how fast can you get there, but how good is the experience while you travel. This concept is not trying to be efficient, it's trying to be irreplaceable. And that is a genuinely interesting design philosophy for a vehicle category that has mostly been defined by practicality. It's a concept, it's fictional, it's AI generated, and it's still one of the most spatially ambitious motorhome concepts I've analyzed on this channel. Now, the comment question, and I want a real answer from you. Upper deck as a living and dining space, or upper deck as a full sleeping suite with the lower deck as the social floor? Which layout would you actually want to live in? Two very different ways to use that glass. Tell me below. And if this kind of design analysis, where we actually think through the engineering logic, not just describe what something looks like, is what you come to YouTube for, subscribing is genuinely the most efficient way to not miss the next one. No pressure, just logic.